This case takes place in the United States in the late 1970s, a time when California was already haunted by names like Manson, Bundy, and Hillside Strangler. But few knew that in the quiet hills above Los Angeles, two men were hunting together. Their crimes would become known as some of the most sadistic in American history. This is the true story of the Toolbox Killers. Lawrence Sigmund Bittaker was born on September 27, 1940, in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He never knew his biological parents. Adopted as an infant, he grew up with a father who worked in the aviation industry, moving the family from city to city. From an early age, Bittaker showed signs of deep-rooted antisocial behavior, petty theft, manipulation, and cruelty. By the time he was a teenager, he'd already developed a talent for lying and a complete lack of empathy. At 17, he was arrested for car theft and spent most of his youth in reformatories and prisons. Roy Lewis Norris was born a few years later, on February 5, 1948, in Greeley, Colorado. Unlike Bittaker, Norris came from a broken and abusive home. His father was an alcoholic, and his mother neglected him severely. He bounced between relatives and foster homes, suffering extensive physical abuse throughout his childhood. By adolescence, Norris had begun assaulting women, and his criminal record quickly filled with violent abusive offenses. Two men, born strangers, each molded by trauma and cruelty, and when they finally met, fate would bring them together in a way that would unleash a storm of sadism unlike anything California had ever seen. In 1977, both Bittaker and Norris were inmates at the California Men's Colony in San Luis Obispo, a medium-security prison. Bittaker was serving time for assault with a deadly weapon. Norris was there for rape. Inside, the two became fast friends. They shared similar interests, a fascination with dominance, pain, and control. But more than that, they bonded over a chilling fantasy, abducting girls. According to Norris, the idea came from Bittaker. He suggested that upon release, they should kidnap one girl of each teenage year, from 13 through 19, to keep as trophies. They would record everything, photograph it, and make it their project. By the time both men were released in 1979, the plan was already in motion. After his release, Bittaker moved to Burbank, California, where he got a job as a machinist. He was quiet, intelligent, and often described as polite. He bought a silver 1977 GMC cargo van, windowless, heavy-duty, and unassuming. He nicknamed it Murder Mac. Norris joined him soon after. Together, they began driving the mountain roads near Los Angeles, scouting locations and learning the patterns of hitchhiking teenage girls. They filled their van with what would later give them their name, a toolbox. Inside were pliers, hammers, screwdrivers, vice grips, duct tape, and ice picks. They practiced abduction techniques. They rehearsed how to lure victims inside, and when they felt ready, they began their killing spree. Their first known victim was Lucinda Lynn Schaefer, age 16. On June 24, 1979, she was walking home from a church meeting in Redondo Beach. The pair offered her a ride. She refused, twice, so they drove ahead, parked, and waited. When Lucinda walked past again, Norris grabbed her and forced her into the van. Once inside, they bound and gagged her. Bittaker later said she remained calm. Too calm, he recalled. That angered him. For hours, the men took turns assaulting her, recording the sounds of her screams on cassette tape. Afterward, they strangled her with a wire coat hanger, tightening it with pliers until she stopped breathing. They dumped her body into a canyon in San Gabriel, where it was never recovered. 2 weeks later, on July 8th, they abducted Andrea Joy Hall, age 18. Andrea accepted a ride, unaware of who she was stepping into the van with. They gagged her, took photographs as they assaulted her, and later forced her to pose for Polaroids. After killing her, they dumped her body in another canyon. By September, their hunger had grown worse. They picked up Jackie Gilliam, 15, and Jacqueline Lamp, 13, two girls hitchhiking to the beach. They imprisoned them for nearly 2 days. torturing them with pliers, hammers, and an ice pick. The audio recordings of that ordeal, later found by investigators, were so horrific that even veteran detectives could barely finish listening. One officer vomited halfway through. Their last known victim was Shirley Lynette Ledford, 16 years old. On Halloween night, October 31st, 1979, Shirley accepted a ride home after a party. Her friends later said she wasn't afraid. She recognized Bittaker from the restaurant where he sometimes ate. What followed that night would go down as one of the most sadistic murders in American history. For over 2 hours, the men recorded Shirley's screams on tape as they beat, assaulted, and tortured her with their tools. Bittaker repeatedly demanded that she scream louder, saying he enjoyed the sound. At one point, he used pliers on her genitals while Norris struck her with a hammer. When she finally stopped moving, they strangled her with a wire coat hanger and threw her body onto a random front lawn in Sunland, California, a final act of mockery and defiance. The next morning, her mutilated body was discovered by a jogger. The killers might have continued had it not been for one fatal mistake. A former inmate who had befriended Norris, named Joe Jackson, reported to police that Norris had bragged about the murders. Authorities immediately placed both men under surveillance. In November 1979, Norris was arrested for parole violation and quickly broke under pressure. He confessed in full detail, implicating Bittaker and leading police to their stash of photographs and tapes. When investigators played the recordings, the room fell silent. The chief investigator later said, "I've been in homicide for 20 years, but this tape destroyed me. It's the closest I've ever come to losing my faith in humanity." Norris struck a plea deal, agreeing to testify against Bittaker in exchange for life imprisonment. Bittaker went to trial in 1981. Prosecutors called him the most depraved killer in California's history. The jury agreed. After hearing the tapes and seeing the photographs, many jurors were left in tears. Bittaker was found guilty of 5 counts of murder, 5 counts of kidnapping, and numerous counts of sexual assault and torture. He was sentenced to death. He would remain on death row at San Quentin for nearly 4 decades. Roy Norris, meanwhile, lived out the rest of his life in prison, dying in 2020 at the age of 72. Bittaker followed a year earlier, dying in 2019 of natural causes at 79. The crimes of the Toolbox Killers left scars that still linger in the Los Angeles area. Veteran detectives described the case as one that haunted their dreams for years. The recordings, too horrific for the public to hear, are still locked away by the FBI, labeled evidence of extreme psychological trauma. In the end, the case stands as a chilling reminder that evil sometimes travels in pairs, and that the darkest monsters aren't born in the shadows, they build their own.